So good evening and welcome. I'm Beryl Domingo. I'm a member of Bridgewater Communities for Civil Rights, better known as BCCR. And Mark just gave me the ear sign, so I'll speak up a little louder. If you can't hear me, just do this. So a small subcommittee of the BCCR members wanted to do this forum on book bans, and we're so happy to see so many of you here. We also know that we have a number of people that are logged in on Zoom to talk about this issue of book banning. It may not be something new to you, but you may be amazed to see what kinds of books are being banned, who is doing the banning, and what the history of book banning in this country and elsewhere. Okay, so BCCR, who are we? So Bridgewater Communities for Civil Rights is a community-based organization dedicated to defending the rights of all persons while fostering open communication, providing opportunities to examine issues of social justice, and advocating for the elimination of bias and racism. So there are a number of things that we get involved with. We like to educate ourselves and help our community educated to be to participate in forums like this, so we can bring people together, talk about the things that they feel are important to them and mean something to them. We like to mobilize, which is to engage our community. We stand out. You've probably seen us at the Walgreens on the Common, standing out with signs on whatever the issue is that we feel strongly about. And we hope that people that are driving by gets to see the signs, and they will be, and say, oh, we didn't know that that was an issue. So we hope that that's another way to educate folks. We also create networks with other organizations in Bridgewater, as well as other towns. So we're really well connected with similar minded people elsewhere. And we also like to use our power of speech to influence our local government and our state government, as well as our national officials, elected officials. So we're really an organization that's trying to make sure that folks are, pay attention to the issues of the day and what they can do about it if they're worried and bothered by it. So I want to just thank the planning committee very quickly. Ray Jemian, Maureen Powers, Donna Oshiger, Shirley Phillips, and myself. I don't want to thank myself, but I was on that committee. And we worked really hard to bring this to you, so we're very happy to have you here. So why are we here tonight? We are concerned about the rise in book challenges and book bans, calls for book bans, especially from legislators and politicians across the nation. Book banning is not new. It's been around for probably since books have been written. So here's some statistics for you. Overall, the American Library Association says that 2,571 unique book titles were banned or challenged in the U.S. in 2022. 2,571. A jump of nearly 40% from the previous year. So that alone kind of raises the alarm bells. Why is that happening? Most of the book titles were by or about LGBTQ people, about Black and Indigenous people, and people of color. So again, you see a trend of what kind of books are being banned or challenged. Certain populations are being targeted. Why is this topic important to me? I'll share very briefly to you that I was born and grew up in apartheid South Africa, a country where banning was common practice. Books were banned, movies, plays, and people. People were banned. in South Africa. And why? The South African government wanted to silence opposition to its policies, to silence voices that called for fairness and for justice, and to ensure that their worldview was the only one available to all who lived there. So I couldn't see the movies I wanted to see. I couldn't read the books I wanted to read. I didn't even know they existed because they weren't allowed in the country. So book banning is one thing, right? People might say no big deal, but it is a slippery slope. And with that, I'm going to introduce our moderator, and then she'll introduce our speakers. So Carol Copeland-Thomas, over here, has been impacting the world in a significant way for over 35 years, captivating audiences around the world since starting her business in 1987. Some of you may have already taken some workshops and webinars by Carol Copeland-Thomas. Carol creates community as an internationally organized, recognized keynote speaker, a thought leader, and cultural collaborator. She has spoken in nearly every state in the US and 9 other countries, including England, Canada, Kenya, India, Guyana, Japan, El Salvador, and South Africa, and Australia. Carol presented her signature message on facing fear at the TEDx Waltham event in Waltham. So she's a TEDx speaker as well. The speech is available on the TEDx channel on YouTube. In addition to her other business client activities, Carol currently serves as the interim Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer at Curry College in Milton, Massachusetts. So thank you, Carol, for being the moderator tonight. And over to you.
I'm going to stand for this part. Hopefully everybody can see me online and you can see me here and talk about technology. I have my phone here because I am the host of my church's Bible study. And so Bible study is going on because one of our members who lives on the vineyard, Martha's Vineyard, is co-hosting, and so she's there live and the program will go on, and that's why I'm here with you tonight. So that's how marvelous technology happens to be. I want to passionately thank every single one of you for being here today. You have no idea what trouble we are in this country. And if we're not careful, we're going to be like the frog who was put in very cold, tepid water. And then the temperature is turned up, and before you know it, the frog is boiled alive. That's what's happening in this country. I'm not making this up. That's where we are. You just have to think about what happened yesterday in Congress. That's absurd that one person can have that kind of power. And then you replicate that in terms of book banning. I've worn this for now like 5 or 6 months, this pen that says I read banned books. I went to Florida to a conference. I wore as many pens as I could. Ally pen, I read banned books. I had lots of pens on, and my friends on campus, I said, well, maybe I'll get arrested. And they said, well, we'll bail you out. But seriously, it is so important that you're here, and I'm grateful that you're here. I am also grateful to my very dear friends with AAUW, Krista Jimian, Catherine Honey, and obviously Beryl, who is just doing a great job. So I thank all of you, and I want all of you to give yourselves a big round of applause. Every library in this country needs to do this. Every single one. My daughter is in West Hartford, Connecticut, and she's the chair of the board for the Board of Education. I can't tell you how stressful her life has been over the last couple of years. They went to make a change with their mascots because their mascots were disrespecting the indigenous community. The meetings I went to, they made the change, but the meetings I went to included angry parents, police, and the news media. And my daughter having to go different routes going home so that she would be safe. I'm serious. That's how bad things are right now at a school board meeting in suburban Hartford, Connecticut. And so it's Foxborough and other places as well. So I want you to take the information that you're going to get tonight by these wonderful presenters, and I want you to share it with at least 5 people. Because so often in our societies, people will say, it's not my affair, I'm not doing that, I don't feel that way, we'll let the politicians take care of it, and then you've got 5 frogs, and then 10 frogs in the same water getting boiled alive. This country is in trouble, and this country needs these kind of discussions so that we can have diversity of thought, and we can have conversations, but we can also realize enough is enough. And when you're talking about books that are banned, 40%, the numbers up, but the kind of books that are banned, LGBTQ, BIPOC books, etc. There is a design strategy in terms of where these limitations are being emitted and how they're impacting people. So I'm going to get off my soapbox right now, but I wanted to start us off because this is serious business, and I'm just so grateful that you're here. We have amazing speakers who are here today. I'm going to quickly read their bios, and then each one will give us a presentation, letting us know their thoughts, their perspectives, the data that's taking place as well, and then where we can go from here. Pam Hayes Bohannon earned her master's degree in library science from the University of Arizona in 1991. She's been a librarian here at Bridgewater State University for the past 26 years. And she's been interested in banned books since the Reagan administration, many, many years ago. Her favorite banned books are The Handmaid's Tale, that's an interesting book too, by Margaret Atwood, and Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. That is Pam Hayes Bohannon. And then we have Jed Phillips. He is the director of the Bridgewater Public Library right here. With a library career spanning more than a decade, Jed began his librarianship in information services as well as technology and user experience before moving into library administration. Therefore, we have this wonderful group in person and our virtual audience as well. A vocal advocate for freedom of information, he shares a growing concern for the recent increased prevalence of censorship and information restricting rhetoric. When not serving on the library, Jed can be found can often be found in the woods, foraging for mushrooms, not poisonous kind, I hope, or enjoying a nice cup of tea at home with his partner and 2 cats. That's Jed Phillips. We then have Christine Richards, and she's the coordinator of teaching and learning for the Bridgewater-Raynham Regional School District. She has a Bachelor of Arts degree from Brandeis in English and American Literature and Elementary Education, and a Master's of Education from Framingham State University in Literacy and Language. Master's in Education and Administration from Endicott College. This is her 23rd year in education. She spent 7 years as an elementary school classroom teacher, 12 years as a K-5 literacy specialist, an instructional coach, and now is in her 5th year as a central office administrator with Bridgewater-Raynham. Is Laura on? Laura is now on. Now I can introduce Laura. All right. Laura first joined the ACLU of Massachusetts in 2007 as a human rights fellow, studying immigration detention conditions, and was part of the legal team that challenged the legality of the largest immigration raid in Massachusetts. Currently, Laura leads the field team, which includes organizers, campaign strategists, and policy experts. She works with advocates at the local, state, and federal level on issues-based campaigns and community-building efforts. As a Latina and an immigrant from Argentina, she often advocates with Latinx communities in Massachusetts. Laura is a graduate of Tufts University, the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, and American University's Washington College of Law. We're going to start the conversation with Laura. She's going to give us the big picture from the ACLU perspective. Laura, take it away. Hold on one second.
How's that? Is that any better? All right, testing 1, 2, 3. How's it sounding now?
Yes.
Any better? Yay, excellent. Could the host please allow me to share my screen so I can run through some slides with you all? While you do that, I just want to thank you so much for this invitation. It is such a pleasure to be with you tonight. Very exciting to share this space with a group of folks spending their beautiful Wednesday night where you can be taking a walk. It's just lovely outside, unseasonably so, but you are here with us in this beautiful library, so thank you so much for the invitation. All right, I'm going to share my screen there. My name is Laura Rotolo. As you've heard, I am the field director of the ACLU of Massachusetts. The American Civil Liberties Union, of course, is an over 100-year-old national organization, and I work for our state office, our state affiliate in Massachusetts. And we think a lot about books, and about banning books, and about free speech, and about censorship, and we're thinking about it more and more, as you can imagine. So, to start us off, I just wanted to give you a little trivia. Does anyone know what historians believe was the first book to be banned in the United States? When and where?
The Puritans.
I didn't hear. What did you say?
Puritans.
Puritans, yes, indeed. More specifically, it was right here in Quincy, what is now known as Quincy, Massachusetts. Of course, it had a different name in the colonial age, but the book was New Canaan by a person named Thomas Morton, and it was banned in 1637 because it was said to contain a harsh critique of, as you said, the Puritan customs and power structures. And so, book banning is probably as old as books themselves, and we see it right here where we are living now, back at what historians believe was in 1637, and that was not the last time. So in 2022, we saw an unprecedented attempt at censorship in classrooms and in libraries. The American Library Association cataloged 1,269 demands to censor library books and resources, and that was almost twice what they had seen the year before, breaking all the records since the ALA has been collecting those attempts and cataloging them. And if we want to look at where these attempts are happening, it may not be surprising to you, but you might see that Massachusetts right there is actually one of the more popular states where this is happening. It's all around the country. Look at Texas, obviously. Florida, you probably guessed, but you may not have guessed some of the states like California and Massachusetts that you see here. And in fact, in 2022, 36 states not only tried to ban books, but introduced bills in their state legislatures to ban certain books or to set out procedures for those book bannings. And 137 bills were introduced in those 36 states. So we are just seeing an increase across the board. The ACLUs all over the country are dealing with this issue, and we in Massachusetts are not immune to it. If we look at who initiates these book challenges, this information again is from the ALA, the American Library Association. 30% of those book challenges come from parents of school-aged children. 28% of those come from patrons of libraries and institutions. And then we see some lower percentages coming, though a pretty high percentage, 17% coming from political and religious groups, 15% from the boards and administrations themselves of these institutions, and then a very, very small percentage from librarians, elected officials, and others. So you can see that it's not librarians themselves, as I'm sure you will hear later today, who are calling for books to be banned. It is parents and patrons and political religious groups. And where do these challenges take place? We saw in the country, where did they take place? Almost half of them take place in public libraries, such as the one you're sitting in right now. 41% are in school libraries, and then another 10% are in schools themselves. So maybe inside classrooms themselves, that's more than half, right? 41 in school libraries and 10% in the rest of schools. So more than half of these are happening inside school buildings. And then 1% in college libraries and some other public institutions. But as you can see, the bulk is really schools and libraries. Now, as we said, in Massachusetts, we are not immune to this problem. In 2022, there were 45 attempts to restrict access to books in Massachusetts. And of those, 57 book titles have been challenged in Massachusetts. Now, we are not aware of any of these challenges actually being successful, and that is really due to people organizing against them. And I'll give you some tools about how to do that later, but we have seen community groups rise to the challenge. We have seen children, students, stand up maybe for the first time ever at a school committee meeting, and talk to their superintendent, talk to their administration, and tell them why these books are so important to them. And it has been just, boot camp or a lesson in organizing for a lot of these communities who never thought that in 2022 in Massachusetts, they were going to see books try to be banned, taken off the shelves, or stopped from coming to the shelves of a Massachusetts library or school. So, around the country, again, this information is all from the American Library Association. They have a fantastic website where you can learn more. It's ala.org. The 13 most banned books. You probably know some of these. But let's see if you can tell what the pattern here is, right? Gender queer. All boys aren't blue. The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. Flamer. Looking for Alaska. Perks of Being a Wallflower. You can see that at the top 13, and it's 13, not 10, because there was a tie among some of them, more than, I think, 7, at least 7 of these books have to do with queer issues, LGBTQ plus issues, and they also have to do with communities of color, right? With issues of race, issues of gender, issues of sexuality. All these books have been attempted to be banned around the country. And so when we look at the kind of books that are being trying to be banned or prohibited or taken off the shelves, we have to ask ourselves, what are the books that aren't, right? What are the books that nobody cares to keep on the shelf? And this is where we get into what are people's rights and what are the legal issues that are involved here. And I think in terms of legal issues, there are really two. One is equality and the other is free speech. The third, we can also talk about what this means in terms of our democracy. So, children have a right to equal education, right? We have state laws, we have our state constitution, we have federal laws such as Title IX that entitle students to equality in public education. And when we see that books are being targeted because they speak to national origin, they speak to gender identity and sexual orientation, these types of bans can become illegal. They can run afoul of our laws and our Constitution because they're so clearly targeted at certain kinds of books. And then, of course, there is free speech. Free speech also includes not just the right to speak, but the right to receive information. And our courts have said that free speech includes that important part, right, to receive a variety of information. And when you are not allowing students to receive a diversity of views, that could run afoul of their free speech rights to a full education where they are receiving a variety of views. And also in terms of the equality issue, it's important to note that especially for LGBTQ communities and children, we see a much higher risk of bullying, suicide, mental health issues when these kids feel isolated. And what we've heard from the students themselves is that when they see books about themselves on the shelves, they feel welcome, they feel like they belong, they feel like they have a community. And the opposite is true. When those books are targeted to be taken off the shelf, they feel like they're not welcome. And in fact, that is the message that they are getting from their community, that they are not welcome. The same is true for kids of color, right? When they see themselves represented in books, it's welcoming. And when they don't, what does that say to them? And how does that impact our kids' mental health, bullying, all these issues that we see in schools? And then lastly, I think we have to think of diversity in education as really a bedrock for our democracy. And we at the ACLU are really feeling like this is a crucial moment for our democracy in general. So at the same time as we are fighting books being taken off the shelves and classroom censorship, we are also fighting things like bans on drag shows at a pride parade, right? We're seeing all sorts of attacks on free speech that go even beyond the classroom and the library. And that really gets to the heart of our democracy. We're big believers, obviously, that free speech is a bedrock and diversity is a bedrock of our democracy, and that we are all better for it. So I want to tell you about something that happened right here in Massachusetts, in a town called Ludlow. The town proposed a policy, and the policy was not about taking books off the shelves, it was about any new or replacement library materials. Any new or replacement materials would be subject under this policy to a prior review and approval by the superintendent, and after public input, the school committee. Now, I hope that the other panelists today can talk to you about what the process generally is, but generally, school librarians do not have to go to the public or to the school committee to approve every single book that they buy, right? We entrust our librarians to know the materials that are appropriate for that age group, for that community, and we don't sort of micromanage them at the public level. We don't normally have a public process for every new book that is acquired. But Ludlow proposed this. And part of the proposition was that the definitions were extremely vague, they were overbroad, and the standards were really repressive in terms of what materials would be allowed. It banned what they called sexualized content, but they didn't really define sexualized content. And the policy would have punished school district employees who didn't follow this policy. They could have been terminated. And in fact, the policy itself was a copycat of a Pennsylvania county policy, almost word for word. So that happened in Ludlow, Mass. The ACLU, we heard from the community there, we jumped in with a letter saying, look, we're not in court, but we do want to tell you that we think this policy could face a legal challenge, that you are looking at legal issues with this policy. And in fact, we dove really deep into the definitions of sexualized content and the lack of clarity. And in our letter, we asked, for example, would this picture be inappropriate? Part of the definition talks about breasts and not being able to show parts of the breasts. Would this picture be inappropriate? The policy talks about nudity. Would this picture be inappropriate? Part of it was something that they called covered male parts in a turgid form, without defining what that means. Would this picture be appropriate? And so we really went into the details of how ridiculous this policy was, how unclear, and how impossible to implement. And part of the letter I'll just read to you. Say, under this proposed policy, images and descriptions of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden would be categorically banned from elementary school library materials, and librarians seemingly could be fired for choosing to introduce elementary students to the joy of ballet by showing them male ballet dancers performing the Nutcracker. We urge the Ludlow School Committee to reject this proposed policy and hope other officials take note. Such policies undermine student rights to receive an accurate, inclusive education and pave the way for unlawful discrimination. And the great news is that the policy was voted down by the school committee. It did not go into effect. And that was because, not just because of this letter, but because the community in Ludlow really rose up, spoke about why these books are important, and the policy was not put into effect. So we've also done a letter to all superintendents, school committees, and community members on behalf of the ACLU and GLAAD. Because so many of these books touch on LGBTQ plus community issues, that we really wanted to lay out the law about why these policies, they shouldn't pass these policies, why they might be illegal, and they're absolutely against public policy. And so I want to tell you about what you can do. You can learn more, as I said. The AALO website is full of amazing resources. We at the ACLU have also launched an online toolkit where we take the experience of so many other cities and towns and states and put it all in one place. So if you're facing this in your community, do reach out to me in the ACLU. But here are some resources that you can use. That's a barcode for the website. We'll teach you how to resist book bans, We'll talk to you about other restrictive policies and some know your rights materials that you can share with your families, with students in your area. And we also have something called an Advocates Academy, where we run workshops all year long, and the next workshop coming up is actually on this issue. So you'll be invited to attend that workshop as well. And right now you can take action to ensure that these kinds of bans don't happen anymore in Massachusetts. There is a state bill, it's SD 2673, it's called an Act Regarding Free Expression, and the bill would ensure that there's transparency and procedures around any attempts to ban books. And we are very supportive of this bill. That QR code will take you to a page where you can tell your legislator to support SD 2673. So there's much more to do. Thank you for your time, and I really look forward to more discussion and more questions.
Laura, thank you so much for that very informative. You highlighted we have lots of work to do, so we all appreciate the resources, the QR codes, and what we have to do next. Thank you. We're going to move on and have Christine Richards to continue the conversation.
So thank you so much for having me here this evening. My name is Christine Richards, and just to provide a little bit of background about me and who I am and why I am passionate about this issue and what I bring to this issue. But are you on mute? My name is Christine Richards. I'm the coordinator of teaching and learning for the Bridgewater Rankin Regional School District, which is
That's a bit louder.
louder for us. Okay, sorry. See, I'm focused on this. I'll use my teacher voice. So this is my 5th year in the Bridgewater Rankin Regional School District as the coordinator of teaching and learning. The position is a central office administrator position, and my focus is on humanities, English, social studies curriculum. I also am in charge of our English learner department, and I run some of our grant programming. A little background on me, to be a little repetitive with the introduction. My academic career was all around books and reading. I was an English and American literature major in undergrad while also studying elementary school education. I taught in the classroom in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade for 7 years, and while doing so, got my master's in literacy and language, and became a literacy specialist and instructional coach, and spent 12 years in Franklin as an elementary school coach and specialist, working with teachers on teaching kids how to read, teaching kids how to write, and teaching kids how to write books. Then I did come here to BR, and as I said, I'm in my 5th year. I think 2 other parts about my identity that are relevant to this conversation is that I am a reader. I read every day. I listen to a book on my 40-minute commute to and from work, and I read with my children. That final part of my identity as a mom is what really helps inform my work with families, particularly when it comes to issues of parents bringing up concerns about things that their children are reading at school, right? I try to appeal to people always with that lens of understanding that as educators, we have families, children in our care all day, every day, and I know what that means to me as a mother sending my children to school, and so I try to have that lens when I'm talking to families. Just a little bit about my personal beliefs as it comes to book banning and access to literature. In my mind, reading is powerful and transformative. I've been a reader my entire life. My first banned book that I loved was Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. I was probably 10 years old, and it's grown ever since. I firmly believe that reading is powerful and transformative. I believe that literacy is a civil right. Lit World is an organization very near to my heart that you should look up. They host annual World Read Aloud Days, and their belief is that one of the reasons that our democracy functions is because of literacy, and that every child, every person on the planet is entitled to and deserves a literate life. And I also believe that all people, and especially children, need books to serve, as Regine Simmons Bishop said in 1990, as mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. When Laura was talking about the power that books can have for children, I have seen it firsthand. Children need books where they see themselves represented. However, children also need books where they are learning about other types of people. wonderful people who are nothing like them. I grew up in Western Massachusetts in a very homogenous community. I learned about other cultures, other people, other ideas through reading books, and it is essential for all kids to have access to high quality literature that lets them learn about the world that they are a part of. That's where I'm coming from when I'm speaking to you this evening. As far as the Bridgewater-Rainham Regional School District, we do have some things that I feel are safeguards in place that will prevent things like book bannings from coming into being. So Laura was mentioning school committee policies. And so I brought with me 3 of our school committee's policies around instructional materials, reconsidering instructional materials, and the acquisition of library resources. And I'm not going to read, 5 pages of school committee policy to you, but they are on the BR website if you want to read them more thoroughly. But the first policy is policy IJ, instructional materials and how instructional materials get selected. And just to pull out a few ideas, they must present balanced views of international, national, and local issues and problems of the past, present, and future. They must provide materials that stimulate growth in factual knowledge, literary appreciation, aesthetic and ethical values. They must help children develop abilities in critical reading and thinking. They must help develop and foster an appreciation of cultural diversity and development in the United States and throughout the world. They must provide for all students an effective basic education that does not discriminate on the basis of race, age, color, religion, genetic information, military veteran status, homelessness, familial status, ancestry, ethnic background, pregnancy or pregnancy-related condition, national origin, sex, gender identity, physical disabilities, sexual orientation, or any other category protected by state or federal law. The next policy, policy IJR, is reconsideration of instructional resources. And so this is if someone were to come forth and request the removal of an instructional resource or a book from our library. And the policy states that typically this comes in 3 different varieties. Either concerns about something that is religious. We have a place in our library for factual, unbiased material on religion. Ideologies. Libraries should, with no thought towards swaying reader judgment, make available a balanced collection of primary and factual material on the level of their students on varied ideologies or philosophies which exert or have exerted a strong force either favorably or unfavorably in government, current events, politics, education, and other phases of life. And the third one, which I think, frankly, in my experience, has been the one called upon most often, which is profanity, obscenity. Materials shall be subjected to a test of literary merit and reality in context using criteria established. And the policy goes on to talk about what happens when a concern is brought up. The one thing, the key point I think here is that the material shall not be removed from the school pending a decision and a review. The final school committee policy that I want to point out is policy IJLA on library resources, and I believe that Laura was talking about the Ludlow policy they were trying to enact. And our policy ultimately says the primary objective of the Library Media Center is to implement its resources to enrich and to support the educational program of the school. And ultimately, there are criteria for selecting library resources and criteria for the weeding out of library resources. One of the ones I kind of snickered at was things that are just clearly outdated. And I remember when we were doing some weeding out of our books, we had one, it was about computers, and it was written in 1987. And clearly, perhaps there have been some advancements in that technology, and maybe we can find some better materials. So that's where the school committee policy is at this point. Another thing I really wanted to point out to folks was as a district, our student success plan. You can find it on our website. We worked all the last year on developing the success plan, vetting it through multiple stakeholder groups, and we finally put it into effect this year. And I have it here if anyone would like to take a look at it. But ultimately, one thing that I want to point out in our student success plan is our equity statement. As a district, our DEI coordinator, Kayla Barrios, along with the DEI committee for the district, and then approved by Superintendent Ryan Powers, we have put front and center in our success plan, our equity statement that I'll read for you right now. The Bridgewater-Rainham Regional School District will remain steadfast in its pursuit of creating and maintaining an environment where all community members are able to be their full and most authentic selves and feel a profound sense of belonging. The district commits itself to lifelong learning, recognizing that true diversity and equity work is continuous and requires ongoing commitment of our professional and personal development, resources, and time. Further commitments from the school, the pillars of our success plan. The first pillar is safe and supportive schools. The district will employ coordinated efforts to ensure school environments where all students and staff are physically, socially, and emotionally supported. And then under curriculum instruction and assessment, the district will utilize a cohesive, rigorous framework of teaching, learning, and assessment that is based on a multi-tiered system of instruction and support that meets the academic, cultural, social, and emotional needs of all students. The Student Success Plan goes on to outline action steps that the district is going to undertake this year, and as the years go on with this 5-year plan, we add steps to that. And these steps show, and the equity statement show, and the school committee show a real commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion work, and that includes access to high-quality literature for children. What I will say is in my 5 years here, there have been concerns raised over books. Typically what will happen is that a teacher will receive a concern from a family member and will typically share that with the principal, and then the principal and or the teacher will come to me. And I, as the one in charge of curriculum, I like to, make sure we're sending out a unified message, and I'm always happy to discuss this. And I try to tell the teachers, if you have someone concerned, send them to me. I don't want teachers to be anxious about giving kids books because they're concerned about pushback. I'm happy to kind of take that on and have those conversations on their behalf. Sometimes it is the concerns are raised due to content in the classrooms or libraries, but just as often, parents will come to us with concerns, not based on anything that happened in school or that's in the library, but just based on the news. Oh, the governor of Ohio said no one should read this book. Do we have it in the school? Oh, I read somewhere on Facebook that this book is problematic. I want to make sure we don't have it in the school. So that's a lot of what we get. We get more concerns about things that are taking place in the classroom than we do for things that are in our library, though not exclusively. And when I have these conversations with families, the goal of my goal is to always to try to come to a mutual understanding. When I talk to these families, I try to listen to them without judgment and to understand their position as a parent. Again, one of the things that I always say to families when they're talking to me is, I have a 13-year-old, I have a 10-year-old, and we spend a lot of time as a family talking about our values. And I understand the concern a family may have about those values being challenged at school. But I can close my eyes and rest easily at night knowing that no matter what my child reads about, no matter what my child encounters at home, the values that my family believes in will hold true, and that they should feel confident in that as well, and that being presented with alternate views or alternate ideas will not fundamentally change who their child is. The goal is always to come to a mutual understanding that this book is staying in the classroom. Families do, and it does align with school committee policy, have the right to opt their child out of participating, and without any level of being penalized or anything like that. Teachers will provide an alternate assignment as needed. We have not formally had a request for materials to be removed. Yes, not exactly. And again, would I say that every conversation I've had has led to families like openly embracing diversity in books? No, but we've had agreements to disagree or opportunities where parents will opt to not have their child read material and then not push it any further. We do have a review process in place should that happen. I'm sure folks heard about Old Rochester and what happened there with book bans being sought out, and so a lot of the Java-like groups with other fellow curriculum directors and assistant superintendents in the area this has been a topic of conversation, and so districts collaborated around what to do when these concerns are raised and when there is an official request to remove material. And the process is heavily reliant on the American Library Association. As Laura said, their website is phenomenal. The resources they have and the structure they have in place to help in those sorts of situations are what we very heavily rely on. And the last thing I'm going to say, I was asked, what can the town do? What can BCCR do to support the schools? And really, there's really only one thing, and that's vote. I think when someone is running for school committee, you need to know what their opinion is as it pertains to this issue. Because ultimately, that's where policy is made, right? And then second would be, not related to banning books, but just related to really good practice, is to support school library budgets that allow for libraries and librarians. The only librarian we have in Bridgewater Rainham Regional School District is at the high school. So we have 7 schools, only one of them has a librarian. We have wonderful proctors that work in our school libraries, that work with the principal or work with me to stock the shelves with books for children to read. However, we do not have folks whose job it is to be a librarian for children. And to me, those are the 2 big things that would support us as a district, would be that support from the community in those areas. So thank you so much, and I'm happy after our other panelists speak to answer questions.
So many comments, and just one what came to mind was a good defense is a good defense is a good offense. You have dealt with the offense so that you are ready for the defense, and certainly with these policies, it's making a lot of sense. Hats off to you. Voting, we could have a whole section on that. That's the bottom line. And then going back to Laura's comment earlier, I actually deliberately bought The Book is Gay because I knew it was bad. So I made a point to buy it on Amazon. Yes. We're going to move on and talk to Pamela Hayes O'Hannon, and she's going to continue the conversation. Pamela.
Thank you. So I will tell you a little bit more about my interest in book banning, what started in the, unmute, here we go. So I'll talk a little bit more about my interest in book banning that started during the Reagan administration. I was in high school in 1980 when Ronald Reagan was elected the first time. And it was we saw the rise of the moral majority. I noticed that some of my classmates, their parents were requesting that books be removed, that their kids not read certain materials, and I thought, well, we are in high school after all. I mean, but yeah, Judy Blume, yeah, no, can't have that. And I just thought, what do they think we don't know? I read forever, and my mother let me. I didn't have to hide or anything. But books about sex then were really cautionary tales, right? And that was the issue with Forever, was that 2 teenagers had sex and nothing happened. They used birth control, they had a relationship, they learned about relationships, and then they broke up. That was it. Something that that's a normal thing, right? Prior to that, we saw books like, there was always a pregnancy, right? There was always a pregnancy if teens had sex, often a death, right? It was maybe an abortion and then a death from the abortion. In Mr. and Mrs. Bojo Jones, the baby died. Books with gay and lesbian characters were always sad. They were always sad. Gay characters were depressed, unsympathetic, and probably died. In the case of I'll Get There, It Better Be Worth the Trip, it was the gay character's dog who died. I mean, it was always sad, always sad. And they were always secondary characters. And then, we had this rise of the religious right, the kind of the birth of it with the moral majority, and then we had all these concerns about witchcraft and the occult. Because that's anti-Christian, right? That's anti-Christian. So, I mean, even as a high school kid, I couldn't wrap my head around it. I mean, I was raised by an atheist, so. But, so my first presidential election was, I voted Mondale Ferraro, but we know how that turned out. But as, Laura told us, I work in the university library, and there's not a lot of activity there with challenges and book bans. But I will tell you 2 stories about Bridgewater since I've been there, and these are both maybe 20 years old. One involved, so if you're not aware of our collections at the university, we do have an educational resource center that has a children's collection. It is not really an area that's intended for children to come browse in. It's for teachers, it's for researchers, who research children's books. Okay, but so we do have a collection of children's books. So this happened maybe around 2000. We got a vague complaint from administration. Someone had found a list of books that were, for a teacher resource, I think for Black History Month or something. So some administrator found this list, which of course back then was just on paper, right? I don't even know where it came from. But the administrator saw the list, determined that some of the books on the list were sexist and or racist, and wanted to know why we had them at the library. So, the person who was in charge of the Educational Resource Center, the librarian who was in charge of the Educational Resource Center, and the director at the time, wrote a letter and explained, this is not a children's library, this is a resource for teachers and scholars, and they need to have the primary resources. Some of our scholars research sexism and racism in children's literature, and they need those primary resources. And apparently, they never heard another word about it. They should have been chagrined. The other one is the children's book by Maurice Sendak, In the Night Kitchen. We have 2 copies of it in the children's collection at the library. And if you're familiar with the book, you know that there's an illustration of a baby naked, and you can see the little penis. So somebody decided that they needed to cover that up, and so in one of the copies, somebody pasted shorts so that you can't see the baby penis. But we never got a formal complaint about it. We just discovered it. We just discovered a book like that. So, the other, we do have a reconsideration policy. We wrote it in 2006. I am not aware that anybody has ever asked us to reconsider books formally. We did have a discussion amongst the librarians in 2001. You may recall that Dr. Seuss Enterprises, stopped publication of 6 books that they determined were racist and had hurtful images. So we had them in our collection, but we also have a policy that says, we collect books with, the books are not, we do not remove books just because somebody doesn't like, the ideology. And that also, we have people who research racism in books. We didn't want to get rid of them. But we were also aware that somebody was likely to steal them if we didn't do something. So, and at the time they originally ceased publication, they immediately, people could go onto eBay and sell them for $1,500 if they had a copy. So we didn't want somebody to steal ours, and sell them on eBay. So what we did instead was we took the books out of the children's collection and moved them to our special collections where the books don't circulate. You have to use them only in the library. And we had done the same thing with the book Little Black Sambo for the same reason. We didn't want people to steal it, but we did want people to be able to see the book if they were researching. So, as I said, it's very rare that we see it in college and university libraries, but that doesn't mean we're immune to censorship. What I've noticed is these challenges we're talking about right now that are, the ones that we're seeing against LGBTQ themed books and authors of color. Those are coming from the right, and this is something I'm going to, so externally, complaints come from the right. Internally, they come from the left. And so we're seeing things like kind of our liberal-leaning people shouting down speakers they don't like. I mean, if we are going to be, if we want to have conversations, then it does have to include everyone. And shouting people down is, that's called the heckler's veto, and it actually isn't protected free speech. If you disagree with a speaker, you are certainly free to speak up and ask and engage the speaker, or invite a different speaker who you do agree with. But shouting down speakers isn't appropriate, and that's something we see on college campuses, and it tends to come from the left. I'll tell you one particularly egregious case that I read about was at the Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, IUPUI, a staff member who was also a student, Keith Sampson, was reading a book in the break room called Notre Dame versus the Klan, How the Fighting Irish Defeated the Ku Klux Klan. Some other employees saw the cover of the book, which depicted Klansmen in hoods, and reported him for racial harassment. Never mind that the book was about a real historic event, one in which the Klan was defeated, as indicated by the title. He was reprimanded. He was reprimanded, and a letter was sent to his file. It took him 6 months to get that letter removed. I believe the ACLU was the one who helped him. So book bans and censoring of ideas really do go hand in hand. It's just, they come from different places. And I will say this, like what we're seeing now, again, it is coming from typically the right, but book bans and challenges can come from anybody. They can come from the left and the right, Democrats, Republicans, people of all colors, atheists, Christians, people of all creeds. They do come from everywhere. It's just what we're seeing now, we know where they're coming from. Also, just regarding book bans and how it affects colleges and universities, is that students who've had their choice of reading material limited prior to coming to college may come unprepared to discuss challenging and controversial topics, and that's what we do at the university. That's what we do. Furthermore, young people who are allowed to read what they like are more likely to become readers and therefore more prepared for college study.
Reading a book and get arrested, all that kind of stuff. Thank you very much, Pamela. We're going to continue our conversation with Jed Phillips here at this library. Jed, take it away.
Yep, my name is Jed. I'm the director here at Bridgewater Public Library. And I just want to start off and say that I believe firmly in the right for all of you to read. No one should have the ability to tell you what you or your child can read other than yourself. That's what this fundamentally comes down to. This fight is a freedom being restricted and someone else's values being imposed on someone else. It's not about the book, it's not about the content, it's about restricting someone else's freedom. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about some talking points of how we kind of diffuse concerns here in Bridgewater. Then I'll talk a little bit more on definitions and things like that. We've been very fortunate in the 4 years that I've been here. We have not had a single formal request for reconsideration. We have had questions, concerns, opportunities for me to have conversations with members of our public. This here, just as a prop, this wonderful graphic novel, not for children, it is for adults, called The BB. Author is Craig Thompson. I brought this because this was, at a previous library, the first book I officially had to deal with a patron who was officially complaining and requesting us to be removed from the library. First point, I bring this up, it's also the first book that I directed my staff to purchase when I became director here. It's a beautiful book.
Can you raise it up?
Yes, raise it up. Yeah, it's wonderfully illustrated. The reason why I bring this up as an example is that, in my experience, the vast majority of complaints and concerns come from individuals or people that are part of groups that haven't actually read, even in part, the book they have a problem with, never mind in its entirety. So for us to diffuse these things, the very first thing I do is sit down first with the item in question, say, let's go through it. I want you to talk to me about what it is that you find so offensive. Some of the talking points they use to get these items removed. Well, what if there's something in the collection that you have a problem with? Simple response. I am not me when I walk through that door in the morning. I am the library. We are professionals. We are trained. My entire staff has the belief that it's principle above personal opinion and reason above prejudice at all times. What our personal beliefs are do not come into the equation whatsoever. The only thing we focus on is ensuring that information is available to individuals that are looking for it. Some talking points. Library is a marketplace of diverse and sometimes opposing ideas. In this day and age, we all, both the left, the right, the middle, have a tendency to fall into kind of an echo chamber, especially with social media, where we're only hearing what doesn't offend us. We're hearing what we agree with automatically. I think that's a fundamental problem of why we're having this battle in the United States right now. We're no longer capable of being able to disagree with someone and still be civil and have a conversation. So that's always been my number one priority, is open that dialogue again, talk, find out what's really bothering you. In the case of this book, Habibi, there is some nudity, there is some violence in it. That was their initial complaint about it, that it was inappropriate, there was pornography. Talking a little bit further, what we really found out was, at the beginning of every chapter, there's a beautifully illustrated page where it's, again, this is about, takes place in an environment full of Islamic Muslims. The beginning of each chapter has a beautifully illustrated description that is comparing similarities of the origins of Islam to Christianity. That is what was offending her. She was using the nudity as an excuse. So we talked about that a little bit more, kind of broke it down, ended up not having an official complaint at that point. Another big one is they always say, these people complain, this is inappropriate. I always advocate all librarians remove that word from your vocabulary. Appropriate, inappropriate is a highly subjective opinion. We don't operate as professionals with those words. The key word is relevance. We collect items for our collection that have relevance to, in whole or in part, our community. Simple as that. Does the item have relevance to a subset of our community? It belongs in our collection. Simple as that. We always want to reframe the argument. They don't always pick that up. Someone comes in and they don't want children reading a certain book. I try to rephrase, it would be awful to have anyone tell you what your child can't read. Sometimes they stop for a minute and think about that and they go, oh, I'm doing that. Sometimes they steamroll right through that. You have to go to the next kind of question. But you always have to reframe that argument. Sure, we can ban what offends you, but then that opens up the door for people to ban what offends them, and that might be your favorite book. We document everything. We reiterate constantly in all of our policies our beliefs. And basically, I'm just going to read a couple excerpts. In our policy, the library recognizes parents and legal guardians as the parties responsible for the reading and viewing habits of their children. Plain and simple. However, the selection of materials for the library collection is not restricted by the possibility that children may obtain materials their parents or guardians consider inappropriate. If you are uncomfortable with the idea of your child reading a certain book or your responsibility, you need to have that conversation with them. And our responsibility is to be stewards of a wide, differing, diverse collection of information. How you access the information is up to you. Other questions that a lot of these individuals and organizations with book bans is obscenity. I don't want to talk about kind of like the legal definition, the accepted legal definition of obscenity or pornography. What is pornography? What is obscene? Pornography, by definition, is intended to be titillating. A lot of people will argue that genderqueer, for example, has illustrations and situations of sexual nature. Anyone who's looked at the parts of that book that are being most questioned, nothing about it is titillating. It's very medical really. It's very sterile in the way things are described. The legal standard for what is obscene, really that we've been using for about the past 50 years, comes from a Supreme Court case, Miller versus California, 1973, called the Miller test. I'm going to summarize just what applies specifically to public libraries and access to information is any item that has literary, artistic, political, or social value cannot be defined as pornography. So by definition, fundamentally, any work of literature, if it is truly literature, cannot be obscene. So if anyone comes to me and says this is obscene, I'm like, well, let's talk about what obscene is in the eyes of the law. Many of these conversations, as some of my panelists have said, sometimes the best result is we agree to disagree. But that's what's great about this country is that we can disagree and we can all still maintain our decency. What can public libraries do with this? Always implement a sensible system, both in collection development, procurement, and consideration of any items to be removed. We refer multiple locations on our website and our policies and procedures to the American Library Association's Library Bill of Rights, the freedom to read, their freedom to view statements. They've been a wonderful resource for all public libraries. Always have a clear, methodical policy and procedure. Our policy and procedure is right on our website, all of our policies and procedures, explaining what it is we do and how we determine an item is worth being added to the collection, how we periodically assess what's in that collection for removal or update, and what we do if someone has a complaint. We have to recommit to those principles constantly. We try to make the request for reconsideration form as easily accessible as possible. We do not want to prevent people from putting in these complaints or these concerns. We want to educate them. We want to have conversations. But I do advise any public library to include language setting limits on reconsiderations. A lot of organizations, I'm not going to name them in other parts of the country, some libraries, when a book is under consideration, it's pulled from the shelf and unavailable while it's under consideration. They've used this as a tool, as a weapon, where, okay, we're never going to get it removed from the collection. We're just going to spam continual requests for reconsideration, so it's constantly unavailable off the shelves. So our policy is, one, anything that's under reconsideration, final determination is from the director, myself, and anything under reconsideration is to remain available and in the collection until such time a decision is made. Additionally, you want to put limits on how many reconsiderations. We will not reconsider here at Bridgewater Public Library a reconsideration request for an item that we've received a request for within the previous 12 months. We'll say we've already assessed this, we've gone through our process, we've had staff go through it, it meets our criteria, and thank you for your concern. What I would talk about, though, is the real threat that's happening, and this is a fight that libraries are losing. I don't want to be alarmist, but there are states that we've lost. And the real concern is state criminalization of the profession. A lot of states are passing state laws where they can go after the director, they can go after librarians for having items in the collection that they feel is inappropriate. They can say, you have smut in this library, I'm going after you. Do I think this is actually in practice going to work? No, there's just way too many librarians to arrest. There's not enough jail. It's just, but what they can do is they can pick and choose a couple of librarians to make examples of how us all are being afraid and not standing up. So I know the ACLU, ALA, United Against Book Bans, they have legal funds set up. They're an incredible resource to defend what we are quickly becoming, librarians as front line, in the trenches kind of battles. We've been very fortunate in Bridgewater due to the wonderful community we have that we haven't had these issues, but I have colleagues in other libraries in other states that have had death threats simply for having the children's picture book, Freddy the Farting Snowman. Sure, kind of crude, not worth death threats. We have libraries that are receiving questionable books back into their book drops full of bullets and bullet holes. They're using them as target practice. And that's sending a very clear message. So what can you do as the public to really support public libraries? Get involved. A lot of these organizations that have an agenda They're doing kind of grassroots takeovers. They are getting people with their views in to become majorities on library board of trustees boards, on PTA, schools, and then they're pushing their agenda. So as we've said, vote, know who you're voting for, but one step further, get involved. You know, run. If you support a library, put your money where your mouth is. Get out there, get the pavement, join us, because it's getting kind of scary out there, quite frankly. I don't want to run too much longer because I know we have a lot of questions. I want to get to the panel part, so I'll leave it there.
Bullet holes in it. Librarians getting death threats. My daughter having to take different routes going home. This is how serious things are. And I want to first ask Laura, I have lots of questions. We want to engage our audience, and then we're going to have you to ask questions, and then our friends online as well. Laura, are you familiar with the Houston school system? I believe it's Houston, where they have eliminated the library jobs, and they're now doing other things besides being librarians. And is this a trend now that you're seeing in other parts of the country? Laura? Laura, did you hear my question? You didn't hear. Okay, hold on one second. Okay, Laura, can you hear me now? Great.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, my question was, are you familiar with the, I'm not sure which part of Houston, because it's such a big city, but I believe it's their school system where they have eliminated the librarian jobs. Maybe it's part of Harris County, but they have reassigned them to other parts of the school system, and their jobs have been eliminated. And my question was, if you know anything about that, is that now showing up in the research that you are aware of?
So to make sure that I understand the question, of a case where the librarians were reassigned to another part of the city or?
Of the school system.
I don't know if that's a specific case. I'm not surprised. Certainly there is a vast underfunding of our libraries, as you heard tonight. And money is power, budget is power, and I think it drives home the fact that we really need to pay a lot of close attention to local politics, local budgeting issues. And it sounds like this was perhaps an attempt to, maybe defund the library, right, by moving the person somewhere else. And that's, that's politics. That's people needing to get involved, needing to speak up in city council, town meeting, school committee, whatever the local body is, and make their voices heard and demand that the priorities, the budget priorities fund the libraries. People fight for funding in the schools all the time, but it comes back to a political matter where it's up to the residents of that area to really get involved.
Thank you very much. Pam, I wanted to ask you, Pamela, you're at Bridgewater State, you're with students, very vibrant students. How tuned in are the students at Bridgewater State to this issue of book banning?
Some are.
Sorry.
So I also teach Spanish at the university, and so I am invited to the departmental meetings for the Global Languages and Literatures Department, and I had brought up at one of their meetings my concern about the book banning, and because it's a literature program. The foreign language language program is a literature program. I said these are the stories that we're teaching. It's Latinate, Hispanic. These are the same people who are being banned, and certainly we teach a diverse type of book, right? And so, we discussed our concerns about it, and there was a student representative in the room, and he said, you really need to tell us about this. I don't think any of us know. And I was just stunned, because I couldn't, how could you not know? I hear about it on the news all the time. On the other hand, today, because it's Banned Books Week, this is my second Banned Books Forum, and I was invited to participate in a conversation on campus and kind of lead a discussion about book banning. And there were some very knowledgeable young people in the room, but only 3. So I don't think they really are aware of it, honestly.
And that's my concern. I wanted to ask that question just because so often we are deciding where we're receiving our news and our information. And for young people, they're not necessarily getting the news from CNN or Fox or MSNBC. They're very heavily involved in social media platforms, TikTok, Instagram, etc. So based on how they're channeling their information and their interests, this can be a subject that they're totally unaware of, and yet they're impacted by it greatly. Christine, along the same lines, it seems like Bridgewater Raynham is on top of things with the policies that you have. Has it helped to educate the community, the parents, in terms of the importance of books and how you want to function in a way where books can get a fair chance?
I think it's interesting. I think that my goal when we engage with families around reading is around the other is almost avoiding the issue of the idea of banning books. We want your children to be readers. We want them to read beautiful works of literature. We want you to come in and we'll show you how you can support your child at home as a reader, how you can engage your child in conversations about the things that they're reading. To be completely honest, my preference would be to not try to educate the community of school families around this issue, because what that tends to do is then have someone say, well, I disagree, I don't want these books in school. I feel like, our job as the school is to provide the children with access to a diversity of materials. And I think that the more we kind of stay out of that more political arena, the better off we are, until that political arena gets brought to us, and then we have no choice.
So you're preparing yourself, but not engaging in the dialogue that may fan the fire.
Correct, because truly that's what I've really found. Again, I've said it before, but really, it's very common that we will get a concern raised after there's some sort of big thing in the media. I was even, there was a part of me that, and I communicated this to Beryl, I thought, my concern is Bridgewater BCCR is going to promote this event, and people are going to drive by and see the sign, book banning. Oh, book banning, we better make sure that that's happening in schools, because they know that there are people in the community who are against it. And so in my mind, it's not, my job is for the 5,500 children in Bridgewater and Raynham. That's my role. And, I would love for the community to support our mission and our vision and our success plan. But ultimately, my focus is on those kids and making sure that we're providing them with the best education possible.
Thank you very much, Christine. Thank you. But Jed, I'm alarmed because you've talked about books that have been shot up and death threats. How?
I'm getting messages, there's no audio.
Can anybody hear me in any way that's virtual?
Did they not hear Christine? Did you not hear Christine?
I don't know. Christine, were you? Did you unmute?
I did not.
Okay.
Can you unmute and repeat what you said?
Apologies. Our speaker was muted. She's going to repeat what she said.
Sorry, so and just to briefly summarize, ultimately the question was around whether or not we as a school district engage with members of the community to try to educate them around these issues. And I said, really no, our primary focus is on providing children with education. And that the more that we bring political issues into the schools, the more problems that tends to cause. I also just anecdotally said that typically when families are raising concerns about books, it is often due to things they've seen on social media and things they've read on the news, not in actual experiences that their children have had. And now that I have another moment, something else is that I think that one of the problems too is that there's a lot of fear out there from parents about what school is going to do to their child, right? That we as educators are there to indoctrinate children to some sort of leftist agenda. If I could indoctrinate children, it would be to be nice to each other and maybe to wash their hands more. I don't have even time to do that with all of the curriculum that we cover. But ultimately, I think that there's a lot of fear out there perpetuated in the media and on social media about what exactly we're doing in kindergarten classrooms, what exactly we're doing in middle school classrooms. And so I think we're best staying out of the political fray of do we ban books, do we not, where do we stand, and really just say, this is us, this is the education we're providing your child. Come see, come learn with us, and leaving the political aspects outside of the school's purview.
Thank you. Chad, with, again, the position of Bridgewater Library compared to other libraries out of the state, how can this library, and you very smartly said that you leave your personality at the door. When you come here, you're a professional, a librarian. How can you be of a support to libraries facing these kind of threats and this kind of restrictive behavior based on the policies that have been set up here at your library?
So in kind of a grassroots way, a lot of us library directors informally have a kind of informal network of support, constantly bouncing ideas off of each other. Just sometimes it's helpful to feel less like you're in a Kafka novel when you know other people are perceiving the same things, just knowing you're not alone. When I say, when I walk through the door, I'm not me out the library, the reverse is true. Once I walk out the door, I am me. I have my own personal opinions, and I will go to events and to other libraries in support of them. I think for a public library, unlike the schools, I don't think we can afford to be neutral any longer. I think public libraries particularly have a niceness problem. We try to be too nice to the detriment of the service we're trying to provide. I think by trying to stay neutral, we're giving credence and equal value to two sides of an argument that are not equal in value. I think librarians really have to get off the sidelines now, and I think we're seeing that. They've all been, librarians are like a sleeping elephant. We're very docile, we're very kind, we're very problematic. It takes a lot to get us going, but you really don't want the people that are professionally trained in sourcing out information to be against you. We will find out all the information there is to find out, and we will wield it like a weapon. And I think that's where we need to be, is that librarians have to just actively go out there and be the warriors that we are.
Probably say democracy and freedom.
I try to stay humble, but Ibram Kendi spoke at the last annual conference, and he called librarians freedom fighters, and to a roaring crowd, obviously. But I really feel like that's becoming less pedantic and more true every day.
I'm going to open it up to our audience. I'm going to get some questions from our listening audience online, but I do have one question I want to ask of Laura as we're just moving more into this political thing. Laura, can you hear me? Okay.
She's on mute.
You have to.
You have to do this.
Yeah.
All right, there you go. Okay, Laura, can you hear me now? Can you hear me, Laura?
Yeah.
Okay, great. My question is, as we're moving more toward, unfortunately, the politicization of libraries and books and education, etc., what comparison are you seeing with fascism and what we're having here in this country?
Oh, wow. That is such a tough question. I said earlier, and I do believe, at the ACLU, we are struggling with these issues. We believe that we are in a crucial moment for our democracy right now. and we see it in freedom of speech. We also see it in attacks on voting rights, right? We talked about how voting is your voice, how so many of these things come down to the political, and the attacks all over the country on people's ability and right to vote. You know, we're seeing the discussions become so difficult with people with whom we disagree. And we always believe that, you know, the solution to speech that we don't agree with is not shutting down that speech, but is more speech, right? When we protect the speech of someone with whom we don't agree, we're protecting our own speech as well. And so you will see us fighting, you know, for the drag bans I talked about earlier. You know, we saw in towns across Massachusetts trying to ban the ability to, you know, be in drag and perform at a pride rally of all places. We are seeing more censorship in schools beyond, of course, beyond books. So for example, in another city we saw that I believe it was the school committee try to stop teachers from having pride flags inside their classrooms. And that was another situation where we saw the students rise up, go, present their stories, and talk about what this flag means to them. And we're going to continue to fight for everyone's right to say their opinion. Libraries, in fact, especially school libraries, have been recognized by the Supreme Court to be a place that is especially right for First Amendment expression, right? They've actually said so in a series of cases that, you know, our right to speak is also our right to receive information. In a place like a public library and in schools, of course, that right is fundamental to everything else. And so we're going to continue to fight for everyone's right to vote, for everyone's right to choose, for everyone's right to read what they want. And look, I know that these issues are fraught. I'm also a parent, right? I'm a parent of 2 small children in the public schools, and sometimes I don't like the books that they're reading. I just don't. I find that a lot of, you know, especially little kids' books have these terrible gender stereotypes. But on a good day, I'm able to sit down and talk to them about, you know, our family values, our beliefs. You know, let's look at this book together. Let's see what we agree with and what we don't disagree with. But more speech is really the answer.
Thank you very much, thank you. We're gonna go to a question online, and then we're gonna come to our live audience here. So our very first question, and this is probably for Christine. The question is, are all Bridgewater Raynham librarians certified?
So let's, as I said before, we do not have certified librarians. We have the librarian, we don't have librarians. The librarian at Bridgewater Raynham Regional High School is a certified librarian. At our other schools, we have libraries with collections curated based on ordering through, you know, the principal, working with teachers, the books that kids want on the shelves, the books that are the best sellers, the school library journal, that kind of thing. But there is not a librarian. We have a position called proctor. The proctor oversees the library, the circulation of the books, reads to the kids, helps them pick books, but there are not librarians. And you know, I will say that that is not a BR problem. That's a problem in schools across the Commonwealth. When I was in Franklin for 12 years, we only had a librarian at the high school. There were no librarians in the middle schools or the elementary schools. I think with all of the competing school budget priorities, librarians, I don't remember the last time, 23rd year in education, I don't remember the last time that I saw a non-high school that had an actual librarian.
All right. Now, your turn. My friends here in the audience, you can just stand up and please ask your question.
I always hear stories about from the right, saying to me, well, they're showing Mein Kampf to kindergarten kids in this town or that town. When you're selecting books, and how do you pick age appropriateness?
You can, if you want me to.
I think we can both.
Yeah, you first.
So, just for those online, in case they had a question, the question was whether or not how libraries determine what's age appropriate, where it's housed within the library, and everything. We have a entire collection development policy that we make available on our website that all staff that do acquisitions are trained on. It's a lot of assessing the collection for gaps in our knowledge base, ensuring that we have a diverse and inclusive collection. It's going and reviewing professional review of the book. There's a lot of organizations that do this and put out the non-biased factual information. We defer to experts because frankly the volume of books a public library purchases on average, children's librarian cannot read page front to back every book that's purchased. We have to defer to releases from the publishers and adult books, for example, New York Times, things like that. There are more professional organizations out there that rate them based on age group. Here, we are reluctant to put those, on the spine labels for ages 8 and up, or for grades 1 through 3, because every person, every child reads at different, and learns to read at different speeds and at different rates. We have found that if you put something on a book that says for 3rd grade, and we have a 4th grader or a 5th grader that's maybe reading a little bit more slowly, they won't pick up an otherwise perfectly good book because it's embarrassing in a way that they're reading something for younger kids. So we try to avoid that. We do some general broad assessments based on the literature that's out there, but we kind of let our collections transition kind of naturally in age groups. And it's more about my staff discussing with the parent, the guardian, the child, well, what's the last book they read really liked? What's they familiar with? And tailoring our recommendations to that individual reader's reading level and interest.
Good question. Good question. Thank you. Yes.
Going back to the political questions that you're addressing, it seems that there is a political influence that's affecting book banning, and at least most recently. And I wondered if anybody would like to venture an answer to the question why.
Would you repeat the question before we get into this very deep conversation? Yes.
So for the online participants, the question was that these bans seem to have a political agenda or political background. And I guess the question is what we believe is the reason why.
Pamela, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so this came up in the discussion I was having with the students. There was also some staff and professors in the room too, but the spike that we saw in the number of book bans happened in 2020, and what was going on, right? And so somebody brought up, I mean the issue with George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, and suddenly they saw all these young white people standing up for civil rights, and that scares them. And so that was part of it, and I think that's probably accurate. The other piece, we are seeing more publishing of LGBTQ literature, and more people coming out. That's changing the status quo. People don't like that. They don't like change, and it does scare them. They've gotten used to the way things are. We're seeing a change, and it's scary, right? It's scary when we have change, and so it's clear that there's a wave of change, and it's upsetting to some people, and I mean, there was so much that happened in 2020, right? It's almost like it's almost unbelievable. It's almost unbelievable, and that is the exact year that we saw the spike in the number of book bans.
I'll also add to that, in September of 2020, the same year, when our previous president signed an executive order banning diversity on the federal agencies and contractors, I was absolutely livid because that impacted my income. I lost business because of that, because I was working with a large company that was a federal contractor. And the concern I had, and this is why you had all four presenters talk about you getting involved, you voting, etc., is that I went around to my friends, my colleagues in the business of diversity in terms of being DEI consultants, in my anger, and I was outraged. And I said, you know, what are you doing to help prevent this? And I got too many responses. I went online, I was blasting what had happened, and too many people in my profession played it down. They said, this doesn't affect me, not my contracts. I can use other language that doesn't press the buttons that can be pressed. And their very lukewarm, tepid response, in many ways, helped to escalate why we're where we are now. It was during that time period that you saw the escalation of this legislation process that took place all over the country. It started, obviously it started years before, but it escalated around the time period of George Floyd through September or October of 2020. And even though we have a new president and that executive order was rescinded, the cat was out of the bag. It was too late. Yes, Laura and then Christine.
I was just going to add that, you know, let's remember that this is a national effort. This is a concerted effort nationally from the ultra-right, right? It's the great backlash against all of the rights that we have won in the past 50 years. You know, as you heard today, Christine was saying that, you know, the complaints that are coming in because they heard something on the news, right? Because they saw something out beyond Massachusetts. In Ludlow, we saw that that policy was almost word for word taken from a very conservative county in Pennsylvania. These are not necessarily things that are bubbling up from your neighbors because it's an actual problem. It's bubbling up because they hear it on the news, because they are part of this, you know, nationwide echo chamber that they're coming for you, we have to, you know, protect our way of life, and that means going back to not having the rights that we have today. And so it's just everywhere, and it's not necessarily coming from a real place of real concern.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you. Christine.
I will say, I think, too, another contributing factor to what, you know, why. Sorry, I think another contributing factor also is the fact that, you know, if we go back to 2020, the pandemic, we, for the first time in history, brought school into the home, right? Your child was sitting in kindergarten on your couch while you were watching from the other side of the room. And I think that a lot of families who maybe wouldn't have paid as much attention to the books their children were reading or the conversations that classes were having kind of heard things and witnessed things that they found concerning and sparked an interest. Another thing is the mask debate, right? School committee meetings were never so highly attended as when they were going to be discussing whether or not to mandate masks. I think there's a strong connection between that and concerns about the school being raised when it comes to things like the books and the curricular. I think that's not a coincidence that these things all kind of coalesced at the same time. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to get Jed. Yes.
I just wanted to add to that briefly, in that tying in with the masks concern, I think it's part of why this is ramping up in many different arenas is a lot of our governmental leaders are increasingly being willing to be factually false with the information they're putting out there. And I see this very alarming trend towards fascist kind of beliefs where I can impose my will and my beliefs on others. And I don't think the media is helping that. they are just looking for views. They're not looking for putting out truth anymore and educating the public. So I think it really does come from the top down. I think we need to hold accountable all parties to factual information. I mean, that's why Beth is a librarian. What are the facts? But I think we've gotten away from that. People get away from flat out lying, and there's no consequence to that any longer.
Well, do we have one more question before we begin to wrap up? I know that this is lots of food for thought. Do we have anyone else who'd like to, yes, ask a question?
All right, this is a fun question.
Oh, good.
Oh, good. First of all, I want to thank all of you. It's been an excellent evening, and you've all done a wonderful job. What banned book what is your favorite banned book that you think we should all read, that we could all benefit from?
So Jed's going to ask, he's going to re-ask, he'll restate the question. Thank you very much. Great closing question.
So the question posed to us is, what is our favorite banned book that we think everyone should read?
I will answer that one of my favorite banned books is Marlon Bundo, the story that John Oliver wrote. It is a lovely picture book that my children, when they were little, absolutely adored, about Mike Pence's rabbit, Marlon Bundo, and about how he and his life partner and their romance and their LGBTQ relationship. One of my favorites, very tongue-in-cheek, but I definitely like that one. And then for a more serious book, I would say probably, my favorite recent one was All Boys on Blue. That was my favorite recent one.
Thank you much. Pamela.
So, as you know from my introduction, my two favorite,
Are you
as you know from my introduction, my two favorite books, banned books are The Handmaid's Tale, which is a series. That's serious. It's like not fun, right? And Fahrenheit 451. But I'm going to go back to Christine's favorite book. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. If something everybody should read. Yes, everybody, not just girls. And I just happened to read an article by about an author who I really hadn't heard of before, Brad Metzler. He said, "Oh yeah, I read that when I was a teen, or when I was like 10 or 11, because I wanted to understand girls." And he said, "I still don't understand girls, but at least I learned what a bra was."
Thank you, Pamela. Thank you. All right, Jed.
I think any teenage reader should read Genderqueer. I really think it's important. They're going through a period of time where they have questions and they need to know that what's normal. There's no such thing as normal. There's a wide spectrum of experiences, and I think they need to see that reflected in information. I know it seems like a punt, but Fahrenheit 451 really hammers home the importance of information. You control that information, you control everything. So.
Thank you very much. And Laura, last but not least. Hold on 1 second, Laura.
Okay. I was gonna say the 1619 project. That's been banned in many places, and I just feel like that is just required reading for any American, and anybody who wants to learn about this country.
Awesome. Very, very good.
What about you?
Oh, me? Probably the 1619 project. I would go along with that. That would be probably my choice. Yes, very much so. This has been outstanding. I have some material up here if you want to know more about Hispanic Month, which is going on now until the 15th of October. On the campus of Curry College, we have Indigenous Peoples Day. We have a night program that anyone can attend. Last week or so, it was Yom Kippur. There's information here, and then you can see what the Curry College students have done. Please give our panelists a big round of applause. Thank you so much, Becky, and I'll turn it back over to Darryl.
I'm just blown away, but I want to thank you, the audience, and the online audience for really listening and hearing and coming and being interested in what in this issue. We came up with some action steps, and you heard some ideas from our speakers of what you can do. But there's a lot of different things you can do besides, supporting your libraries, of course, and voting. But also email your reps and tell them don't ban books in the United States. Check for pending legislation. And I think Laura mentioned there's a legislation pending right now in the State House. Start a banned book club. How about that? Just read banned books. You'll probably be reading books for 10 years. Build relationships with your school committee so that you know what's going on and have conversations with them. Track book challenges in your area. If you know of a book challenge, track it, see what's happening to it. So write to your newspapers and share your concerns. Host a book exchange that serves youth. Host a local book drive. Restock free libraries. There's just so much. Support your library staff. All three types of libraries: schools, public library, and the BSU library, and all other libraries. So there's definitely a lot of things you can do. We have a list over there. You can take it and support minority-owned bookstores. So I just want to thank our panel and our moderator and our chat monitor for doing an amazing job and for preparing us and sharing with us all of the things that we wanted to know. I think we didn't have a lot of questions because they answered all of the questions during their presentation, so well prepared. So another round of applause. A lot of useful information right here on this table and also over there. If you're interested in one of the books on display, you have to check it out before 8 o'clock as the library closes at 8. We have a survey passing around. There are pens and pencils over here. We would really like for you to fill out the survey. It only takes a minute because it's mostly just check boxes. Do it and leave your completed survey going on that table. And let's see, anything else, people? And I think there's a survey online. Thank you. Everybody have a great night.